Hi, Harry. Welcome. Thank you for joining us in the podcast today. Hope you're well.
Veel plezier. Very happy to be joining you today.
Will we continue in Dutch or should we stick to English then?
As you prefer.
Maybe a first important question for listeners who may not know you yet or your work yet. How would you describe what you do?
I'm somewhere in the middle between training and research. So day to day, most of my work, or at least the people I've worked for the last few years, have been training providers. So my job will be to design a course, to train teachers, or to train people who train teachers. But along the way, I've spent time researching both academic research and research for books and blogs, and then using that within the training. There is an ugly English word called pracademic for people who are practitioners and academics. I don't like the word, and I'm not really an academic, but this is kind of a rough, fair description.
Like the in between the
Exactly.
research and the
Yeah,
classroom practice then. Yeah.
exactly.
But you do have lots of experience in teaching as well. You've taught across different contexts, different countries, different school systems. What did those experiences teach you about what really matters in good teaching?
Yeah, so graduating from university, I taught for a year in Japan and then a year in India. And then I was a teacher in England, but I've also done teacher training. I did a lot of work in Sweden, and I've done work in Estonia, Croatia, and so on. Um, there are a few universals. I mean, I find Mary Kennedy's work around thinking about the purposes of what teachers do quite
Hmm.
interesting, quite useful. So we can say all teachers everywhere in the world must gain and maintain students' attention. All teachers everywhere in the world must understand what students are thinking. Um, and that is intrinsically difficult because their thoughts are hidden from us. Um, my good friend Lucy Crahan wrote a very interesting book where she traveled to places that are or were considered to be very successful school systems. So she went to Finland, Canada, Singapore, Japan, so on.
Hmm.
And she said every country that she went to, she saw at least some children not concentrating, not working hard at some point in the and so even these countries where we think, oh, Singapore, everyone's working so hard, there are some universals, and kids get bored, and when they get bored, they like to mess around. Um, the cultural distinctions then are what make this really interesting. So you can contrast somewhere like Japan, where you have this very strong societally minded approach.
Hmm.
So at the start of every lesson, you bow.
Yeah.
And there are sort of forms of words that you would say at different times. Everyone eats their lunch together. The children serve the lunch. The children clean up after lunch. The children clean their own schools. Um, and so that then becomes quite interesting in terms of, well, if you want a strong school culture, are there elements of that we could copy? We've
Hmm.
seen schools in England over the last few years, more of them would say, actually, our students are going to sit down together with the teacher and have, we would call it family dining. Um, so yeah, there are lots of cultural differences about the way teachers approach those challenges, but I do think the challenges are universal.
Yeah, yeah. And then across those different contexts, as you mentioned, students remain students, of course, and struggle sometimes to continue to pay attention, and it's equally different to try and see what's going on inside their heads, whether you're teaching in Japan or in Croatia or in Belgium.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Before we dive into the topic of the keynote that you will be giving at the Wezenlessen Congress, which is about improving teaching, I'd like to talk about two influential books that you wrote, Responsive Teaching and Habits of Success, if that's okay. The first one, Responsive Teaching, how would you, when a teacher asks you, what is responsive teaching really about? What is it really? How would you try and summarize the idea?
Yeah, so it's about specifying what you want students to learn, checking that all students have understood it, and then doing something about the information that you gain to try and make sure more students understand it. The responsive is not a distraction, but it's very easy to focus only on the responsive and say, well, it's about find the checking and the feedback. It's very difficult to check and to give effective feedback if we don't have a clear sense of our goals, because then
Yeah.
there are so many things to check on, so much to give feedback on, it becomes impossible.
Yeah. Do you feel then that the part the setting clear goals, is that the aspect that you feel teachers struggle with the most, or is it or is do they maybe switch focus very quickly to the final bit, adapting their teaching, and maybe lose sight of the goals?
The intrinsically hardest bit is the feedback, because
Yeah.
when you set your lesson goals, you can have one goal. Maybe that's optimistic. One goal for your 30, 40, however many kids. When you have the feedback, well, you've got 5 students who understood, 10 students who kind of got it, 20 students who, whatever. And so suddenly you're teaching 3, 4, 40 different lessons at once. So the
Mm.
feedback's the really difficult thing. I think the specifying goals is the bit that gets overlooked, which provides, which then creates more difficulties for the teachers later on. So you can think, and I talk in the book about this, and when I lead training, I used to think that I had quite good specific goals. I'd say, well, I'm a history teacher. I want students to understand the causes of the First World War, and that sounds quite precise. But
Mm.
actually, that doesn't tell me what the students should leave the room knowing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Dylan Williams cites some quite old research now talking about this challenge of can students add 2 fractions? And that sounds again like a precise goal. Can students add 2 fractions? But I could say, well, I ask my students, can you add a half and a third? And you ask your students, can they add 15
Yeah. Yeah.
seventeenths and 43 50 seconds? And that again is a different thing. So yeah, it's just very easy to underestimate that, is what I'd say.
Yeah, and probably as well, if the vaguer the goal is, or um the harder it probably is for teachers, or the more it gets translated in different ways in different classrooms by different teachers. Plus, it's a matter, I think, as well, of subdividing it into very specific knowledge that you want students to teach, and that you then need to check and give feedback on as well.
This is a lot harder, right? So it
Yeah.
demands a lot more from the teacher's knowledge, because you have to know what exactly within that topic matters most, where are they going to find it difficult, and you have to spend more. Again, if I think back to my early days as a teacher, I'm planning 21, 22 lessons a week. I'm drowning under the work. Oh, I'll teach them about this. But actually, what I needed to be doing was spending more time in pinning down exactly what I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be
Mm-hmm.
teaching them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If teachers want to take a first step in becoming more responsive in their teaching, is there like a small but powerful step that you feel teachers can start with to improve their teaching in that way?
So I would say take your lesson plan for the next lesson you're thinking about. Pick the most important thing you want students to learn, and then choose a way to check that's going to tell you whether every student has understood it. And the easy way to start with that is an exit ticket. So just pick one question that's going to tell you, if we go back to our fractions idea, pick the fraction that you care about most, get every student to do that silently and independently, look at the exit tickets at the end of the lesson, which is a 2-minute job, and then you can know who understood, who got what right, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as well, indeed, thinking about ways to check with every student whether they have reached those
Yeah,
goals.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Um, in Habits of Success, you focus on the role of habits in learning, which is an aspect that is quite often overlooked, I think, when we read about learning and teaching. Why are habits so important when it comes to learning? What power do they hold, do you think?
So I started a doctorate looking at habits, which I didn't complete. But some of the most interesting
I didn't know. Okay.
no, well,
I do.
yeah,
I think
it
habits
was
are extremely interesting as well. Yeah.
yeah. Oh no, it was good. It was good. I really enjoyed that bit. It was then facing some of the other choices and what that was going to get in the way of doing, like other books I wanted to write and so on. Um, One of the really interesting bits of research I looked into was habit researchers who'd say, look, all behavior is habitual on some level.
Hmm.
So if you imagine going from well, so you're a teacher going from home to school. Um, for some people, they'll have been doing that same drive for 20 years. So that drive will be a habit. And for any teacher who's ever left the house and turned right instead of left because they were on a Saturday because they kind of forgot and they were going towards school, that's an example of how habitual these things become. Even if you're just started in a new school, if you are driving, hopefully for almost everyone, unless you just passed your test, the mechanics of the
Hmm.
gears and so on are habitual, which allows you to concentrate on what everyone else is doing on the road. So everything there's an element of habit in everything we do, and the
Hmm.
longer we do things or the more we practice them, the more habitual it becomes. What does that mean in the classroom? Well, you can think of any of your students, and even at the simplest level, when they get stuck on an assignment, some students are in the habit of putting up their hand and asking a question or looking back in their book or something. And
Hmm.
some students are in the habit of giving up or
Yeah.
poking their friend and asking for a conversation. Um, when students go home, some students are in the habit, not very many, but some students are in the habit of locking their phone in another room and
Yeah.
sitting quietly and doing their homework. And some students are in the habit of, leaving their bag in the corner and waiting for the teacher to chase them. So everything is habitual. And so if we want to change what students are doing in the classroom, their behavior, their attitudes, their work, their success, we have to be changing those habits. So that's why I care about habits and why I think all teachers should care about habits. And the same is true also for us as a teacher on day one. It all feels chaotic and very quickly you build habits. You always you always start the lesson in a certain way. You always give out papers starting from the
Mm.
left, not the right or whatever. And again, if we want students to change their habits, we also need to change maybe our habits as well.
Yeah. When you refer to habits in the classroom and students' behavior, um, that sort of links to motivation as well. It's something you talk about in the book too. Can you clarify how those two are related, or what opportunities? If you focus on habits, how is that different than focusing on motivation? Maybe.
This is a great question and one I'm fighting an uphill or losing battle in trying to solve. People think they want motivated students. And I would argue you don't want motivated students. You want students who are in the habit of working hard. Like
Mm.
motivated students are great, but it's impossible to, again, imagine you've got 30, 40 students in your class. I'm a history teacher, and today, because of the curriculum, I have to teach the cause of World War One. Well, some kids are really interested in that, and some kids are not really interested in that.
Mm.
And if I try to spend a lot of time finding them. Oh, we're going to make it into a game. Oh, this is just like something you're really interested in. I'm going to be jumping through hoops, um, trying to make everyone happy at the same time. And actually, some days I just don't feel that motivated, or they just don't feel that motivated. I'm tired or whatever. If your students are in the habit of coming in, sitting down, and doing some work, your life becomes
Yeah.
substantially easier.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying don't care about student motivation. I'm not saying don't try and make the learning fun and enjoyable and so on, but trying to motivate 40 diverse humans at once is impossible. So
Yeah.
so do the motivation, but also think, actually, kids, we've got to have a rule in this classroom. When I say pick up your pen and write, everyone's got to write. I can't be having a conversation about,
Hmm.
well, I'm tired today, I've got a headache. Well, fine, but just please do some writing.
Hmm. Yeah. I guess if the habit is like the default setting that they fall back on, then motivation, since um, it's very it changes constantly as well. You kind of like have a safe default mode to fall back on, which helps
Yeah.
if
And
motivation lingers, maybe.
right. And well, motivation follows achievement, right? So yes, if I'm motivated, I'll work harder. But if I work hard and I see myself succeeding, then I'll
Hmm.
be more motivated for next time. So again, our job
Hmm.
is to help students succeed, and then to ask this reflective, okay, how do you feel? That was great.
Hmm.
You excited about tomorrow's lesson? Well, I am now. So yeah, it's complicated, but broadly, I'd say I have too many teachers saying, how can I motivate students? And too
Hmm.
few teachers saying, how can I help students form the habits that they want or that they
Yeah.
need?
Yeah. And then you already mentioned it. It's kind of the responsibility, or in the book you describe it as well. It's teachers' responsibility to, or they at least have some part to play in helping students develop those habits instead of expecting them to do so naturally. Is that something that what habits should we really focus on if we want students to become more successful in their learning? How can we as teachers help them develop those, or what aspects are important when we want to do that?
Do you mean what kind of habits should we seek, or do you mean how do we help them to form the habits once we know what we want them to do?
Yeah, maybe both. If you could
Okay,
summarize
yeah.
them, if we have enough time,
Um, yeah, so I
or
guess
maybe
you can
one,
just think,
maybe like
yeah, no, it's fine, it's fine. We can do both. It's fine. I guess you could just think about the classroom and think, what are the things that need to happen? It's like
mm,
students need to come to school. They need to listen when the teacher or the other students are talking. They need to work hard. They need to keep going when they get stuck. So these are kind of the most basic habits. And if a teacher is wondering what to think about, I would just say to them, in your last lesson, what was the thing that most
yeah,
got in the way of the learning? Was it
hmm
students not concentrating? Was it students talking? Was it students coming late? Whatever. Um, then we need to say, well, okay, we have this habit, and let's take for the sake of argument, yes, when I say time to work, everyone picks up their pen and works. Um, we can think about this question of motivation or giving students a reason to do it, and that might be the motive of like, oh, when you grow up, you want to get good grades, but it can be simpler things like role models and social norms. So like, here's someone from last year's class. Look how successful they've been. You could be like them as well. There's something around making that moment of starting really easy. So maybe I'm going to make, if I've got students to do 20 questions, I'm going to make the first 3 questions super easy so that there's no excuse for not picking up your pen. Everyone can do this. Um, and then there's some stuff around maintenance. So I want to be going around and giving feedback. Again, reinforcing things like social norms. Say, look, I've got everyone working beautifully. This is fantastic. Oh, look how hard. Look how great this work is, and so on. Um, so yeah, this sort of little model of giving a reason, getting people started, and maintaining that.
maintaining it. Yeah. And lots of practicing as well, probably before it actually becomes a habit. A
Exactly.
constant focus of the teacher.
Yeah. It's never, you never, no one's, and again, we see this in our own lives, right? If I want to start going to the gym more often, it's not like one day I start and then every day I'm
Yeah.
going to struggle the first few times, or maybe many, many times, and I'm going to have to restart. I'm going to accept that, so I've been trying to run more. And then a couple of weeks ago, I had an injury to my foot, and it's just coming up Christmas. So everyone's eating and drinking loads
Yeah.
anyway. And I'm like, well, this is not so great. And I know in January I'm going to have to start again, and accepting that habits have bumps on the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Well, if teachers want to dive into that more, I definitely recommend reading both books. I'd now like to talk a bit more about the topic of the keynote that you'll be giving. The title is "How Can We Improve Teaching?" Which is quite a difficult question to answer. Before we talk about why that is hard and how we can improve teaching, we should probably first define what we actually mean by improving teaching. Two questions which probably overlap a bit. First of all, what do you think we should improve exactly? And secondly, how do we know whether teaching has actually improved? Yeah.
Yeah, we're covering quite a lot of quite deep and profound questions, which is great. So you have to start with the question of what you think school is
Yeah.
for. And I am sympathetic to lots of, so there are different arguments. There's arguments around social justice. There's arguments around kind
hmm
of national
hmm
identity, passing on national culture. There's arguments around academic learning. There's arguments around social learning. And good and uh, ethical people can have very different beliefs about what matters.
True.
Um, and if you look at, I've just been reading a new paper that's just come out from the Centre for Education Systems, who were comparing different national curriculums, and they said basically all national curriculums have somewhere in the top all of these things. So they're like,
hmm
we want our kids to learn loads
Yeah.
and kind of make the country a better place, and so on and so on. That said, there are some things that can only happen in school, and to me, and can only happen in the classroom. And so to me, academic learning is the number one thing. Like a lot of the personal and social development stuff, often better happens outside the classroom. So if you're trying to develop your social competencies and so on, joining a sports team or going hiking and getting lost and wet and cold with your friends is more effective than some kind of activity you do in 15 minutes in your maths lesson. Whereas the only place you're going to learn maths, and again, this is something parents often do, right? Parents develop, bring up, try and shape their children. Only the maths teacher is going to teach the students maths. And so to me, the priority in improving teaching is increasing the teacher's capacity to help students learn more. So changing teacher practice to increase student learning.
Yeah. Yeah. Great summary, I think.
Do you want me- Yeah, you
yeah.
happy? Okay.
Yeah. Now, as a researcher, you've studied how we can help teachers do that, how we can support teachers in improving their teaching. One of the things you consistently see in research is that it's actually quite hard to do so. Why do you think improving teaching is hard for teachers, and maybe especially as experienced teachers? I think it is maybe even more difficult. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, loads of reasons. Simply put, teaching well is hard anyway, because teaching is incredibly difficult. And we know the evidence is fairly consistent that teachers see initially a very big increase in their skill, their effectiveness, and then a kind of plateau. And for some it continues to angle up, and for some it ends up fairly flat. So why is that? Again, I mean, we can think about habits, that as a
Yeah.
new teacher, your habits are not very effective, and then you form habits which are good enough, but maybe not optimal. So you form a habit that means that everyone gets through the lesson and you're happy and the kids are happy, but that doesn't mean your habit is the one that's going to ensure students learn as much as possible. Also, just teaching is incredibly, like, insanely complicated. This metaphor that you're trying to do brain surgery on 30 people simultaneously. No one else,
Yeah.
like doctors and nurses, we don't expect them to do that. They do one patient at a time because we know
Yeah.
you can't concentrate on
And
everything
their
at
patients
the same time.
are sedated and lying still. They're not moving about.
If only, yeah, right. Instead of being teenagers who actually care much more about their hormones and their relationships with their friends and everything else.
Yeah.
And then relatedly, influencing teaching is you're like trying to do brain surgery on the brain surgeon while the teacher is busy doing these things.
Yeah.
And we can look. It's been really interesting. I think I'm just finishing my book on exactly this topic, like as we speak, and that's led me to reflect on how much stuff has changed. I've been thinking about these questions for like 10, 15 years. Definitely 10, 15 years ago, a lot of the ideas that we had were just not great. We were saying, well, like, we want teachers to like collaborate and talk about their practice and so on, which is very nice. Like, I'm very happy to collaborate. Actually, I should normally be marking anyway, but it doesn't lead to necessarily to a lasting change. And I think we have adopted, both through the research and the kind of practice that we've looked at, we've adopted better ideas around things like deliberate practice and saying it's very similar to what we said about in terms of the responsive teaching, the habits of success, picking a really clear goal, practicing it, checking if it's working, forming it into a new habit, instead of just having kind of the after school meeting where you talk about changing teaching and then you don't really go and change it. But yeah, that's why it's hard, because you're working on lots of levels, trying to do things that are intrinsically difficult with people who are very busy and have formed strong habits.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess on the one hand, related to the habits is you're actually trying them to change something that is working for them.
Exactly.
That's difficult. And then again, as you said, the fact that when we look at professional development initiatives, the fact that you said that teachers collaborate and they reflect on their practice and they talk together, which is definitely a valuable thing to do, but that does not mean, or that does not automatically add the practice component that you mentioned. Is that the one that you feel is most often left out or maybe neglected in professional development initiatives, or one that is harder to incorporate maybe?
Yeah, I mean, this is the big change. One of the two big changes we've seen over the last 10, 15 years in English schools have been more deliberate practice and more instructional coaching. And that has really been an uphill battle against people who were happy, as you say, were happy with the way things were going. And these are much more challenging forms of training, right?
Mm-hmm.
If
Mm-hmm.
I have to sit in the staff room and have a chat, I could do that forever. That's fine. You're paying me to do this, whatever. Whereas if I have to now pick something from my lesson, pick a targeted thing, and now stand up and in front of my peers practice my explanation and then receive feedback to say, well, actually your explanation was a bit unclear. How about changing like this way? That's really challenging, and you can see why people are skeptical. Where we've seen training programs and schools adopt these changes, we have seen huge improvements as a result. And similarly with instructional coaching, where we've gone from, as a new teacher, maybe you get occasional feedback and the observer would tell you 15 things you did wrong, and then you'd feel sad, and then you wouldn't change anything. And now we're much more in a kind of, we're working towards, okay, here's one thing. We're going to
Yeah.
practice it. I'm going to come back next week and see if you've changed that one thing. Um, it's way more effective, but it's really hard to put it into practice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If schools or if schools that you work with come to you and they ask you, we want to work on improving our teaching, but we're obviously limited in time and energy and resources as well. What do you think is a first small step that schools can take if they want to improve their teaching? What would you advise?
Yeah, so there's two planks. One is this stuff around the training, the coaching. So if you're running a training session anyway, instead of just talking about things, try and practice them. If you're observing teachers anyway, instead of giving vague feedback, give one bit of feedback. The other is just thinking about the broader purposes. Really often in schools you see a lack of coherence or a lack of alignment. So like you and I are
Mm,
both in senior level. I personally really love questioning. You really love collaborative projects. When I lead training, I talk about questioning. When you lead training, you talk about collaborative projects. Um, and again, that's so much easier. It's so much easier for two senior people never to have to discuss this than to get into the details. But actually, if we want our teachers to have a good training experience, you and me and everyone else who's leading this stuff needs to sit down and say, well, okay, what are the principles of learning that we think everyone should know? And what should our focus be this year? And actually, then, okay, all of our training needs to be on questioning or whatever it is. So yeah, thinking, and again, this has got way easier because loads of people, like yourselves and many other organisations have sat down and written and said, here are some principles, here's the document, here's the example. We've made it easy, but people still need to adopt this, and that means getting over some social discomfort in the process.
yeah. Yeah, and I think as well the fact, as you say, getting the vision or the it's about prioritizing, right? There's lots of things you could work on, and then agreeing on one priority and really giving teachers enough time and support them in trying to improve that one aspect, one at a time. Yeah, thank you. When it comes to research, we're nearly at the end. I have two more questions, if that's okay
Hmm.
to ask
Yeah,
you.
great.
When it comes to research into improving teaching, what do you think is one of the, as you said, lots of things have changed in the past 10, 15 years. What questions still remain unanswered? What do you think research should really focus on to help teachers improve their practice?
I actually have a paper that's in draft with Adri Fischer from the University of Twente at the
Yeah.
moment around this question. Um, one of the and in it we have sort of 10 different suggestions. One of the ones that well, there are a lot. We've got 10, and among the ones that bother me, one I'll say is very often we design a study that studies one thing. So now I've got this 2-year program for maths teachers, and we get to the end and maybe it works and maybe it didn't. Actually, way better would be if I have a 2-year program. I've got 200 maths teachers. I've got 4 different conditions within that. 50 maths teachers are
Yeah.
remote, 50 maths teachers, and so
No.
on. And I think obviously you have issues there around sample size and statistical power, but I think if we were looking to experiment like that, how can we create more knowledge, practical knowledge more quickly? And relatedly, I've always been really bothered by the implementation issues. Like if you read the evaluation elements, um, invariably they'll say, well, we had 100 schools and like only 90 of them came, and then 20 of them did something different, and then the next year half of them dropped out. And so we have this like, oh, here's this program. and almost no one is following the program as we've designed it.
Mm.
So thinking more about that question of how do we pursue fidelity in a program, or how do we manage this variation? Because guaranteed people in the classroom are going, I've got no idea, I'm going to do it different. How do we manage that in the ways that are productive? I would love to see more research around both those questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel they're relatively neglected because it's just much more likely that you're going to say, well, I've got €1 million grant to run this thing across 100 schools, and not I'm going to set up all these different programs.
Mm. From a teacher's perspective, from a teachers running their classrooms every day, from their perspective, do you feel that they have an important issue, or across trainings, is there something that regularly pops up where you think, well, this is something that teachers really struggle with in their everyday practice, and there's maybe not enough research to help them answer that question?
Again, very little is done that answers teachers' questions. We research big, high-level stuff, or like the cognitive scientists research things, but in a it's all American undergraduates.
Mm.
So anything around, I would love to see like what are the things that you struggle with most? Again, teachers are going to tell you things like motivation, lesson
Yeah.
planning. Well, who's researching?
Yeah.
AI would be a great example. Who's researching the most effective ways to use AI to plan your lesson in less time? But that doesn't mean you just give it off to the AI and the result is bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
That'd be great, and that you could help millions. Think how much time teachers spend planning lessons, and often how inefficient that is, because we've got I don't know, we've probably got 60, 70,000 maths teachers in England. There's only one maths curriculum. Everyone's doing fractions in September. Do we need 60,000 different lessons? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, stuff around making teachers' lives easier, and that then comes into other problems that we have around teacher recruitment and retention. Like if we help teachers to work more effectively and more efficiently, maybe they'll stay in the classroom longer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. All right, thank you. Interesting. I maybe have one final question.
Yeah, great.
Is there like is there one misbelief or one belief or misconception that you hope that if people come and watch your keynote at the conference on how to improve teaching, is there one belief or misconception that you would like to tackle, that you want to have them abandon by the time they leave the aula, and they feel, well, this is something I used to believe, but now I feel different. Do you have something like that? Like give a teaser, a teaser.
Teaching teachers is exactly like teaching students. Um, if you teach students, you have to check, know what their prior knowledge is. You have to check that they've understood new ideas. You have to revisit things because people forget things. And I think when I see, so for years I ran courses, or continue to run courses for people who had become a teacher educator, having spent a long time as a teacher. I would often see them, they would have at some moment this light bulb moment where they realized, I can just do the same things that I'm doing in my classroom because the problems are the same. But it doesn't come naturally. We know transfer is difficult. So
Hmm.
I'd encourage the teachers of teachers to think about what has worked for them when teaching students and apply those same techniques. Maybe you frame it differently, maybe you tone it differently, but the challenges are the same because they're just challenges about how the brain works in terms of forgetting and attention and so on.
Yeah, and that's something both students and teachers are confronted
Exactly.
with, obviously, in learning.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Interesting. I'm looking forward to it anyway. Thank you so much for joining the conversation, and we'll see you in March.
Looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.